Right. And so I guess I'm going to help try to summarize my thoughts, right? We've been rambling for 2 hours, and I definitely apologize for that because we had a lot to cover. We're pretty much doing 6 hours of work to kind of condense this down into something that's hopefully bite-sized enough for people to get into it.
I mean, we will be breaking this into smaller episodes that will air weekly. So you don't have to worry about trying to take it all in right now. I mean, that's something we'll do later. I will say this though. So to go to your point about Jinx, letting go and just giving up on everything. I think what that is sort of a callback to the parallel timeline where Vi isn't there. So so when Vi wasn't there, Zahn and everybody was happy. And if you think about what we see in the epilogue, it kind of becomes a fulfillment, except instead of Vi being gone, it's Jinx, really.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not pick up on that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because you see Savika, she takes her seat at the council table. So
yes.
So clearly Zahn is being incorporated into the political process of Piltover. So in a way, everything kind of comes full circle. I mean, what we saw in that parallel universe reflected what could have been, or what could have been that reality, and what we see by the end of episode 9 is the road to kind of syncing up with what we see in that parallel universe. Now, obviously, there are a few things that are missing. Obviously, Silco and Jinx aren't there, and obviously Vander is gone. But we see that it's sort of taking things in the direction where things need to be at the end.
Yes. So there's definitely some silver linings. So, but yeah. So I'll go ahead. I'll give my final thoughts to this because, as someone that loved the first season, I liked aspects of the second season, and I still felt like there was a good show in there. I just unfortunately think that too much of it, there was just too much other stuff that made it way too bloated. And I think that is by far my biggest issue with it, because like animation, superb, right? Fantastic animation. Loved it. Loved the look of it. Kind of the alternate reality world, the just like seeing like the smoke when it's building up, and they kind of almost make the smoke be its own type of character, and you got just the fight sequence is so well done, like just super cool. And one thing I always feel like doesn't get enough attention nowadays that this show does very well, the soundtrack is great. I love the soundtrack to this. The soundtrack during the fight sequences, kind of the songs that happen where, in the world where Echo and Powder are together. I just like love the song that plays during that, where you kind of see them getting this bond. It is just so well done. And I think there's part of this that works well with the story. It just got a little bit too long in the tooth. I think they wanted to do too much, and it absolutely should have been more seasons. I'm really bummed that this is where they felt like they wanted to end. I know they've discussed doing kind of like more like side stuff with this, so not necessarily maybe with these characters, but still within this universe. So maybe we'll see, more of this in the future. But I felt like they wanted to do too much, and it just created too many problems. The Black Rose in particular really bothered me because I just feel like it was kind of a huge character moment or a huge character motivation for some of the characters, but it doesn't really get drawn out too well. And I think you put it extremely well at the beginning of the review when we're talking about this. The show focused too much on, I think, Victor and Jace and their kind of, I guess, ideology conflict, as opposed to just kind of keeping the story a lot more focused on, kind of, Piltover versus Zahn, and just focusing on the character dynamics that we had with Vi and Jinx. Like, I just felt like there was too much that they wanted to add, like having like Maddie in it and whoever the hell Loris is. You're just trying to do too much with it, and it's such a shame. I still think one thing that was a huge standout for me in this season was number one, I absolutely loved Mbessa's character. Now, I don't think that they wrote her super well, and that'll be, it is what it is with that. But I just love the fact that she's absolutely a wolf in wolf's clothing, right? There's no mistaking her. When you see her, you know that she is willing to do anything it takes for her own ambition. And there's something interesting to be said about that that I really liked. I think Vi to me was a lot weaker this year. I felt like she kind of was too on the fence about everything. I just felt like her character never was willing to commit to something, and that kind of took me out of it. Whereas Jinx, I felt like went through a whole lot more kind of character changes because of everything she go through with someone like Isha, who I think kind of did more with that. And yeah, I think that's kind of my, I guess, final thoughts as much as I could put together after going through 9 episodes and 6 hours worth of material. Love the music, love the art. I just wish they focused on the story for season one. Should have just been where they wanted to continue it without trying to bring in all this other stuff with the arcane and the magic and there's too much going on.
Yeah, they kind of cut themselves short on that. I felt like if they continued on with, like, I don't know, 6 seasons, I think the Hextech one would have been phenomenal for season 3 or season 4. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's there, right? The story and the ideas I think are there. You just can't do it in the 9 episodes, and they just focused on the one.
Well, the problem here is the fact that they talked about the hex core, but they didn't do, in my opinion, they really didn't do enough to kind of elicit our interest as to what is going on with the hex core. What is there anything off about it that we need to be concerned about? They just said, here's the hex core. It does its thing. It powers the city, and that's it. So for them to start saying, oh yeah, there's something wrong with it, and then to go into that whole storyline, I felt like it was a bit heavy-handed, really.
Yes. Yeah, there was an opportunity there to do something different, and they combined or wanted to combine just frankly too much. You just can't do it with that. So I enjoyed seeing these characters again, and I enjoy this, and I guess I'll give my final score for it. I have a feeling from the way we've talked about this, and we haven't really talked about this before today, so I just want to throw that out there to everyone listening. Like, we don't go through, we didn't have some big discussion about this prior, but I'm getting the feeling that you dislike this more than me. I'm gonna give this, I would say, a 3.8 out of 5. I think that everything I talked about with the music, the animation, the fight sequences, I think all that's still super top notch. And I feel like the weakest thing to me was they just had all these story beats that they just didn't give enough time to flesh out. I think some of the character motivations were kind of over the map, which is really unfortunate. But I still think there was something I still enjoyed with this season. I only wish that they had more time to do more with it than what we got. So I'm going to give it a 3.8 out of 5, but I think I'm going to regret that, and I might change my score. But I want to hear your final thoughts.
So I had a writer, screenwriter Rodney Stringfellow on last season, and we were talking about the difference between character and plot-driven storylines. Now, what I really like about that discussion is that we went over the fact that neither one really is, superior over the other, but with character-driven plots or character-driven storylines, the plot is secondary. It's more about building a connection with the characters in the story and seeing how they react and caring about the way that they react. And I feel like with season 1 of Arcane, that's what we got. We got a character-driven storyline. We really didn't care too much about what was happening. We just wanted to know what Vi and Jinx were thinking and how they would react to a situation like that. And the story was very simple. Like, we didn't have to put too much thought into it because we were focused on what these characters were doing. Now with season 2, it's very much plot driven. There's so many storylines, running parallel to each other that you lose track of them. And to be honest with you, I kind of lost track by episode 7. At that point I was sort of focusing more on the animation than anything else. And what I find really, really distressing is the fact that they sacrificed the character development that they did so brilliantly in season 1 in favor of plot-driven narratives. And there is a way to pull it off, but you have to do it, very, very well, or else you're gonna, lose the forest from the trees. And that's what happened here, is the fact that, we had so many different storylines going on. We were focused more on what was happening than what the characters were doing, or how they were interacting with one another, or what they were thinking, right? So, as opposed to where in season 1 we cared about how much Vi was trying her best to try to rehabilitate her sister and, bring Powder back to Jinx. Here we were just more concerned with the fact that Vi was, just going down this long, dark road of being a drug addict and, missing Caitlyn, and, apparently she can't hold her own against her own sister in a fist fight. So I feel like everything, all the lessons, all of the triumphs that they had in season 1, I guess over the past 3 years, they seem to have forgotten those lessons, and they were treating it as if it was a brand new show, and it kind of felt like a new show altogether, really. So for me, it just seems like everything that we hoped for, all the goodwill that we saw in season 1, got canceled out by season 2, and it's just a huge disappointment, really. It's not. I mean, it's not something that I would definitely go back and watch, because there really is nothing to salvage, really. Now, I will agree with you. Mbessa was phenomenal. I think she was the driving force, but I don't think she was enough to save it, really. And then you've got Victor. I felt like Victor, the way that Victor was characterized and the way that his character developed, it was really, really unnecessary and uncalled for, really. It would be like taking, much loved superhero like, Clark Kent and Superman, turning him into a crazed villain where all the DC villains and superheroes have to team up and take him down, really, because it's anathema to who he is as a person, as a character. And I feel like Victor is such, to turn Victor into this crazy Ultron-like villain who wants to perfect humanity and ends up wiping, everybody off the map. It's out of character for him. It's not who he is. And I'm even wondering if they even understood who these characters were and just forgot all about season 1 altogether. But for me, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Just because in terms of story and character development, there's much to be lacking, or much to be wanting, I should say. The only thing that really, really kind of, saved it was the fact that the animation was spot on. I would say it was even better than season 1. The soundtrack was phenomenal. The sound design was amazing. My God, like the way that they would just, switch between, slow-mo animation and regular animation, I thought was phenomenal. Like I'm sitting there taking notes, just saying, all right, so when I go into Blender, like, how do I do this and how do I do that? I wasn't really paying attention to the story because there really was nothing to garner from it. So that's my score, 3 out of 5.
Right.
I know you said you wanted to change it, so I guess for once we can do backsies on this one. If you had
Nope. I'm gonna stay pat. I'm gonna stay pat. I'm gonna stick with what my gut was. Like I said, I still think that there's a lot out there. I'm sure maybe in retrospect I might think about that a little bit differently. So maybe it's just because of I'm just kind of coming off of everything that happened and just trying to sift through everything. It had a lot of misfires. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it didn't.
Well, I will say this, because you were the one who turned me on to Arcane in the first place. Because when it first came out, you talked to Storm about it. You were just, you wouldn't shut up about it. And we were at our friend's house. I think you made us watch 2 2 episodes of it, and then when I came home, I ended up watching the rest of the season. Probably didn't go to bed until 4 that night. Um, how did you feel about the fact that there's like that what you got in season 2 was different from what you got from season 1?
Oh, I'm definitely not a fan of it, right? So I can't say I like the direction that everyone went. I still think there's some things there that I would say, like for instance, Victor's always looking for a way to cure himself. So like, what would you do if you had a means of doing that, where you were ultimately like the beacon of hope that you can fix, quote unquote, everybody? And like Jace kind of looks at it like, there was nothing to fix, right? You were fine the way you were, right? And I know that's kind of a cliche way of looking at things, but like I still kind of got that feeling. However, right, I still disagree that it was not a needed thing to have like everything billow up like that. I would have liked it to be exactly the way you suggested, which was I wanted to see more of the conflict between Piltover and Zahn and just kind of go for with that. Like to me, that was where the bread and butter was, and that's where my interest was. So it's unfortunate that that took second fiddle to everything else was going on, because those 2 characters, Victor and Jace, ultimately took the stage. But I still think there's things in there that I enjoyed what they were wanting to do with it. It just didn't execute in the way I think it needed to be executed. And that was my biggest gripe with it. Was I felt like I knew where they wanted things to end. It just, unfortunately, the journey there was lackluster. And it's unfortunate because I would say like easily the first season's probably one of the best things I've seen in quite some time. It's definitely up there as far as like my favorite shows. I would watch it again. And you know what? I'd probably watch the second season as well. But I think it'll always kind of have that bitter taste in my mouth that this is a season that could have done a lot more. Right? I don't want to compare it to Game of Thrones like season 8 because I just feel like that's overdone at this stage. But it absolutely was a show where it needed and should have got more time. I'm sure that there's been stuff out there as far as why they felt like they didn't want to do that. But I feel like it was a huge missed opportunity because they definitely could have pulled off the story they wanted to. They just couldn't do it enough.
I think in this case it wasn't a question of more time; it was a question of more seasons. And I think you.
I'm sorry.
You hinted at
more, yes.
You hinted at that earlier, and I felt like, and I feel like that 3-year gap between seasons 1 and 2. I would say that's normal at this point in terms of TV production, but I feel like they could have at least, if they at least done like 4 seasons, absolutely that would have made things a whole lot easier. I'll even go on a limb and say even if they did 3 seasons, right? Then the 3rd season would definitely have been, the one to wrap things up in a nice bow, because then the Piltover and Zahn conflict could have been resolved by the end of season 2. Then you have the threat from Hextech, and that's where you get the ideal society at the end. But
yes.
It is what it is.
It is.
But go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think. Do you think season 2 of Arcane was phenomenal, or were you just disappointed as we were? And as always, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.